Hi everyone, I'm Sid. I'm a technical guy, been a technical guy for the 20-something years. Worked all the way through from being just a developer to be a technical lead to be CTO. There's been an extreme variety of various clients from my career, what resulted starting from one-man bands, finishing with large corporate clients. What resulted in complete variety of different technologies that I'm familiar with or used in the past. Primarily, focus of the career was surrounding e-commerce and anything that relates to the e-commerce, but it's not limited to, because as bigger the company is, as high chances that they're using different technologies, different ways of running the business. Let's phrase it this way. Now, the whole idea behind this webinar, it showed up because of the past probably 10, 15 years, industry has changed. So around 10 years ago, I could have had a sensible conversation with a business owner, with executive senior leadership about the details of, let's say, ERP integration or any kind of other integration. It could be like, should we use SOAP? Should we use REST? Should we use flat file solution? What sort of data we should be submitting and vice versa. Today, I'm bumping into senior IT directors who are asking questions like, what is code repository? Or whereabouts Salesforce is hosted. Code repository is the way to store the changes done to a particular code base. Salesforce never had an option to actually be on premises. You can only store data on premises. Point being that those senior IT guys, they are missing some fundamental knowledge. Result of it is actually very interesting, because guys like me, we tend to receive unusual requests. Example would be, hey, let's open up a public access to production database that includes live customer data, live order data, live everything. And this request would flow through this IT leadership with the flying colors, no issues, no changes. Nobody would notice that anything went wrong until it will actually get into someone like myself, who will say, like, hold on, guys, you're trying to do actually damage to your business. So objective of this webinar is to do a couple of things. Number one is to work on this conversational gap between the IT people and the business people, and try to improve things and explain what are the processes, what are the principles you could introduce in your company that will help you to, number one, avoid costly mistakes. Because, for example, using my example, opening up production database, chances are would have ended up to damage to a company, at least reputation-wise, right? Now, these principles that I'll be talking about, they are universal. I will be using them to talk specifically about digital platform selection, just because it's an easy target. But you can technically apply it to anything else. Now, to start the whole thing, that's done with the boring part, and now hopefully is the fun part. To start with the whole thing is a little funny story. Now, in a land far, far away, years ago, there's been this company. And we'll get to the poll in a second. It's a very quick, but nevertheless funny story. Let's call this company X. And this company X, it was thriving. It had gazillions of different brands, gazillions of sales, orders, products, customers. It was thriving. Everything was really good, really well. Everything was going really, really, really well for the company. Company had a manager Y. A manager Y was a data guy. It was about data science. How do customers make purchases? What is it that they do? What triggers them to make a purchase? What can we do to grow the business, and vice versa? As a part of his job, he used Salesforce all the time. And over time, he came to think like, well, hold on, we have this e-commerce platform, and they used Magento. And I'm using Salesforce all the time, and I need to worry about transmitting data from Magento over to Salesforce to come up with these fantastic reports. So why don't we simply use Salesforce as an e-commerce solution instead? Counting it was years ago, it was interesting so on its own, because, well, hey, Salesforce is a CRM solution. It's you don't really use a CRM as an e-commerce engine, but well, it didn't really stop him. And a couple of years later, after he started having those shows, he came up with, he managed to push it through. They signed a contract. And the most hilarious part out of it all, that by the time when the paperwork was signed and contract kicked in, this manager left. Now, we will get back to this story, but one of the questions I was going to ask to everyone to think about, how come such a large company with practically endless resources, because like, 50 brands, they do turn around a fair amount of orders. How come they've managed to fail so royally? Just think about it and put it at the back of your mind, because we'll get back to this story in a few minutes. Should we do a poll?
I think one way that we thought to kind of introduce today's session was to do a quick poll, just to understand a little bit more about the audience and where you are on this journey in assessing digital platforms as well. So we thought we'd just ask everyone, what's influenced you in your current digital platform selection? Is this something that your current platform's just been there forever? It's a kind of historic thing that you've not had to assess, but you're kind of looking at your options now. Have you seen any advertisements about great other alternative options? Have you been looking at your company protocols? Have you been recommended a platform by a friend? We know that friends, colleagues, or other connections often have their own experiences and preferences, sometimes very strong preferences when it comes to specific platforms as well. So that's another way that people tend to build almost like a bias towards different platforms as well. Or have you not started yet? Is this kind of the start of your journey towards assessing, and you just want to gain as much information and knowledge as possible? Great. So we can see some questions, some poll responses coming in now. We'll just give it a couple of moments for the last people to submit.
Congratulations to all those people who said aligned with company protocols.
Yeah, I think we can publish the results now. It seems quite static. So it looks like the winner is aligned with company protocols. So that makes Sid happy there.
That's very good. That means you already have the went through the pain, and you've established the process to decide what sort of platforms, what sort of technology you should be using. That being said, there is, like, if we are to combine the rest of the answers together, there are more people who do not have it. But those 7 of you who have it, my congratulations, well done. All right, let's carry on with the thing. So we heard this little funny story. Large company made a very interesting decision. I would be really curious to know what people would say at the end of the session, what they think. Where is it that this company failed? What is it that they failed at? What are your thoughts? Especially so you can compare your thoughts in the beginning, before the webinar, after webinar, just to find out if it was useful at all or not. Now, let's go through. Let's imagine that we're part of this company, and let's imagine that we're given task to select the platform. So we're not this manager. We're just trying to do the right thing by the company. We're trying to do the right thing by the business, and make sure that, well, the entity that benefits the most from our decision is actually the business and not personal choice. So when you work around, like I said, these principles, these processes are universal. You can apply them technically to anything technical within your business. Digital platform is just, like I said, it's just easy to give an example with. So number one, when you need to make this technical decision, when you need to decide which digital platform to choose, you need to figure out who your stakeholders are. You need to talk to them. That would be the step number 2, once you determine who the stakeholders are. And once you talk to them, you need to figure out what the business requirements are. What is it that they want? What is it that they need in order to do their jobs successfully? Now, once you've collected those business requirements, you will need to find a technical guy like myself, or a technical expert of some kind, or a technical vendor. You decide. There's no right or wrong answer here. Who will convert those business requirements into the technical specification? Why this step is important? Why don't you simply use business requirements? Because business requirements are going to be simply talking about like, hey, we need to have an ERP integration. Technical specification for this business requirement is going to have details like, well, we don't simply need integration. We need to be able to submit product data, customer data, order data, and this is the format it needs to be submitted at. So one relates to another. Both of them are important. Once you figure out your technical specification, you grab the technical expert along the way and you go shopping. You go and try to figure out what sort of platforms exist out there. Which ones are good, bad, which ones match your business requirements and later on specification, which ones are not. Objective of the exercise is to cut down the list to 2 or 3, like at most 3. Once you've made the decision, once you've decided like, okay, these 3 are give or take matching what is it that we're looking for, right? The next step, what you need to do is, well, bring it to your stakeholders and present it. What you need during this presentation, what you need to do is present not simply the case like, hey, it matches what we want in terms of business requirements and it matches our specification, what we had in mind. Things you need to have a look at are things like maintainability. How big community is. So for example, you've selected the platform that worldwide launched one single website. Likelihood of you finding large community behind it, likelihood of you finding off-the-shelf solutions, likely of this thing being supported very, let's say, quickly, isn't exactly very high. You want to find something that is a little bit more common, unless you have a strong business case why this particular platform is 100 times better in comparison to any other alternative. Things to consider, like I said, to summarize it a little bit, is how big the community is, what the operational costs are, do we need hosting, do we need anything else, what the license costs are, if there are any. And like I said, how well it matches with what is it that you actually need this thing to do. When you are done with the presentation and people trying to figure out, which one is good, bad, whatever, it's always a good idea to establish what is yes. So do you need all stakeholders to agree that this is a good platform to agree? Do you need 50% of stakeholders to agree that it's a good platform and vice versa? That will prevent bad stuff from happening and people being upset. It's a good idea to grab a technical expert along with your presentation because stakeholders will bring up concerns. You might not know intricacies of a particular platform, technical guy will. They'll be able to explain like this is how exactly we're going to implement whatever the functionality you need, and that will help you to make the right decision. At the end of this exercise, it's always a good idea to ask people like, let's say they've decided yes, right? It's always a good idea to ask them to sign it, pass around a piece of paper that says, yes, I agree, this is a good platform, we should be using it, it's the best thing ever. It's a psychological thing. Person, when he puts his signature and his name and the date on a piece of paper, he will think like, it's not legally binding. But at the same time, they will think twice before putting their name over there, because they will know this piece of paper will be stored. And someone might ask like, hi, why did you decide for this platform later on down the road? Going to a specific example, let's say if we are to choose specifically e-commerce platform. The rundown is give or take exactly the same as what, like, it doesn't really have any extra steps. Your stakeholders are tax team, finance team. Well, tax team, you need to pay taxes. Finance team, because Well, you need to figure out what is it that you're doing with your banking ERP people, because they will need to figure out ERP people, because it will need to figure out what's going on with your accounting, with your products, with your availability, and everything else. And the inventory people, just to define what's going on with your products. So what is it that you're selling, right? What then happens is, once you talk to them and you figure out your business requirements, you put together a specification. Based on specification, you go around shopping, you figure out which platform's good, bad, whatever. To run a quick comparison, for example, like using these companies as an example, like let's say maintainability, right? Salesforce I think around a year ago, had only about 1,500 websites launched worldwide. Magento, in comparison to it, had 500,000 websites launched worldwide. That kind of answers how big the community is against each, and that also answers about a variety of vendors, which one to choose. You don't like your current vendor, you can go shop around if you're in Magento. You don't like your current vendor on Salesforce, you don't really have a big variety to have a look at. Other things to consider that are also important. So once you figure out, like you compare it to for specifically the e-commerce platform, the next step is to present it to your stakeholders for it to vote yes, no, sign the paperwork if it's yes. If it's a no, go back, start the exercise again until you eventually succeed. You want to make sure that whatever the concerns that you're addressing, whatever the process that you go through, it's very well documented as well. It's quite important. The reason why is, down the road, somebody will say like, hey, I brought up this concern during the platform selection, and this is how we were planning to address it. It helps to document stuff. Things to pay attention to in addition to that is ownership. So let's imagine our business runs subscription-based business model, for example, right? What happens with subscription guys, and let's say it generates like 70% of revenue. What will happen then is, let's imagine this thing is hosted by a third party. So it is not owned directly by the brand, by the business that provides these subscription services. Subscription services themselves are executed by a third party. Risks it opens up to the business are privacy violation. Third party had a privacy breach, brand is affected. Second problem, just as big one, is technical issues. So this party has any sort of technical issues, again, brand is affected. Mind you, you cannot do anything about either of these issues. You have no control. Third party manages practically 70% of your business. And depending on how good or bad they're running, is pretty much define how good or bad your business is running. So when you make decisions around the platforms, when you make decisions around like various features it's going to have, using this subscription model as an example, if you're planning to invest into the third party, you need to be 1000% sure that it's not going to go down. Best practice is, if it generates revenue for you, you kind of want to own it. That way you will be in control. You will decide whether or not, like, at least if bad stuff happens to it, you'll be able to handle it gracefully. Second thing to pay attention to, just as important, is integration simplicity, which opens up another separate large conversation, especially using this little story in the beginning. You want to keep as less integrations as possibly one can. Let's phrase it this way. It doesn't mean that the integration is bad. Just the less number of them you have, the better off you're going to be. The second value to have a look at is whether or not a particular integration is customer facing or just a general integration to run a business. Example, customer facing integration is, let's say you have a third party runs a subscription, right? And you have your business, you have your online website. So these two things need to communicate with one another. If there is a problem with this communication, subscriptions are not generating orders. If they're not generating orders, your customers get upset immediately. If they get upset, business takes a hit. Very simple. So that's a perfect example of customer-facing integration. At the same time, if you happen to have an integration with, let's say, your ERP system, right? That's not customer-facing. That's truly internal business. And if it has a problem, well, it's not very good, but customers are very unlikely to complain that your ERP system didn't get orders today, as an example. Third, next area, well, not third, but let's say like next area to have a look at, let's say, right, are the different architectures. Lisa, if you could help us out a little bit here, because that one will require a slide. And I believe that's the next one. Spoke about all of that. Next. Sweet. So the next one is, and that's a larger conversation on its own, like I said, but this is like real world examples. So there's been this company, as you know, and this company migrated from over from Magento over to the Salesforce. So their original setup, talking in terms of the integration points, had only two integrations, and only one of them was customer facing. But between the communication between the website and the warehouse was, well, it is customer facing, because if you do not submit orders over to the warehouse, they are not getting shipped. Customers get upset. Very simple. Second integration point it had that was just as important is ERP system. That's it. Multiplied by 50 different brands, it's still as simple as it gets. Something happens to go wrong, it's not exactly a rocket science to figure out where. You can easily track down which step it is, because you don't have that many things that could possibly go down. Alternative architectures that they went towards to, which is very interesting on its own, is the one below, new setup. So they had to introduce a new entity called order management system. And now they had communication between the website and order management system. They had separate communication, which I will talk about in a second, between the order management system and subscription services. In addition, they had also communication with the warehouse, well, obviously to ship the stuff. They had to also apply Band-Aid between WMS, between the warehouse and the subscription services. And finally, they submitted the whole thing over into the ERP system. So by switching over the platforms, they simply didn't go from, let's say, stable solution, let's say, well-architected solution. So I went to very solutions that provides a really good job security. Let's phrase it this way. Because monitoring alone of every single integration point is going to be a lift, that separate lift. And again, we're talking about a large corporation, over 50 different brands, constant online presence. So imagine this thing, what is written under the new step, multiplied by 50. Now imagine the amount of resources required to simply monitor that everything is running correctly. Mm-hmm. On top of it, chances are during these transitions, there's been challenges around the technical leadership as well. Reason why I'm saying it, and I've underlined it a little bit before, is you see there is this integration between OMS and subscription services, which makes sense. So you have third-party subscription services that want to generate an order, and they submit it over into the OMS, right? And then they have, in addition, a little bit below, they had also integration between the warehouse and the subscription services. It really stands out. This first point alone poses a risk to the business, because if they heavily rely on subscriptions to generate revenue, that's a little bit iffy technical decision.